Secretary of State is in the Middle East looking to gather international support against Tehran. He met with Saudi Arabia's King Salman and Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to muster support for new Iranian sanctions. And for more on the Middle East situations, we're having with us an expert, Geoffrey Aronson from the Mortons Institute. So, Jeff, great to have you with us.
Happy to be here.
Bad things are coming out of the Middle East. We have heard that in the past month, more than 40, in fact, Palestinians were killed by the Israelis. The reason cited was that they were protesting near the border. Which side, in your opinion, is more at fault and therefore to blame?
Well, this is a very, very long story. And to try to pick out one snapshot and to apportion blame really doesn't answer the real problems that we're facing. The real problem that we're facing today is that there is no diplomatic framework for the Israelis and the Palestinians to engage in a productive discussion about resolving their 100-year-old plus problem. And in the absence of a diplomatic framework, more radical visions prevail. And we pay the cost of that vacuum on the border between Gaza and Israel today, because in the absence, when people aren't talking, they're fighting and shooting, and that's what we see today.
So for this round of the conflicts, the people in the Gaza Strip were protesting. They said this is important to them, but the Israelis were saying that initially they were shooting people in the legs, and when people bent down, they happened to be shot in the heart.
Yeah, well, again, this gets us into a he said, she said debate, which we sitting thousands of miles away can't resolve. Both sides are certainly to blame, if you will, but the Israelis, who have the monopoly of force there and who have international obligations, which they are not fulfilling in terms of protecting the welfare of Palestinians in the Strip, who are formally still under Israel's control. The deaths that have occurred on the border are unacceptable. But again, it's a consequence of the absence of a diplomatic framework. For the first time, actually, in decades, President Trump inherited an arena in which there was no settled understanding of how to proceed for the first time in decades. And until now, the Trump administration has not stepped in to offer the parties an alternative framework for engaging in productive talks. And in the absence of that, you have more radical voices prevailing on both sides. And we have the beginning now, the lead up of the 70th anniversary of Israel's founding, which is always an emotive anniversary for both sides. Mm-hmm. Not only that, in the middle of May, the U.S. will preside over the opening of an embassy of the United States in the city of Jerusalem, which it has refused to do along with the international community since 1948. So the diplomatic landscape is changing, but not in any sort of agreed upon framework. And what we need to focus on now is not so much who's to blame, but how we get out of this and begin to address the fundamental issues that have kept the parties at war for over a century.
Let's shift gear a little bit on Iran. President Trump imposed a May 12th deadline for the renegotiation of an Iran deal. What do you think will happen? Will he get out of the deal altogether, or will he, after talking with his European allies, change his mind and renegotiate the deal?
Well, it's almost anyone's guess, which is the good news and the bad news. This administration, in particular, has been less successful at accurately telegraphing its intentions. The system that, generally speaking, leads to a decision isn't really functioning in the way it has historically. So we're all, in a sense, at sea about what the U.S. is going to do about this self-imposed deadline that it set for itself. It has a lot of flexibility because it's making the rules about this. So it can do all sorts of things and claim victories if it so chooses. However, at the end of the day, we have a real fundamental problem, which is the United States is not comfortable with its previous agreement to an international understanding about how to construct a framework for addressing Iran's nuclear interests. And as of now, the U.S. is the odd man out in this. No one else who was around the table when this agreement was signed and ratified is opposed to maintaining the principles that it had agreed to earlier. So the U.S. finds itself isolated as the only major player. Sure.
We'll see what happens in 1 month from now. Lots of things at stake. Now to our earlier story, the U.S. Secretary of State is in the Middle East looking to gather